For hundreds of great shows like this one, go to ONNetworks.com.
Play Value is brought to you by Xbox Live Marketplace.
Now, you may think that video games are all about technology. The guy with the biggest, most powerful hardware is going to win. That is not always the case. In fact, it's very rarely the case. In pretty much every generation of video game consoles, the console with the most powerful hardware has not been the winner.
TurboGrafx-16 comes out in 1989. It is the first 16-bit console system to hit the market.
The TurboGrafx-16 stands out because it's one of the first failed consoles that actually has some great classic games on it. The Castlevania that came out for TurboGrafx-16 is among the best Castlevanias, which makes it among the best games. The problem was that all these titles required the CD add-on, which was very difficult to find in America.
And even if you could find the adapter, it was $400. So they're asking you to buy a $400 adapter to play their killer applications. You know, it's asking a little too much, you know. Ultimately it ends up just failing.
So it's 1992, Sega comes up with this brilliant idea. Hey, let's create the CD-ROM add-on for the Sega Genesis. Now the problem with that was, it was just basically a CD player.
The Sega CD doesn't make the Genesis any more powerful, it just gives it more storage. And the Genesis itself wasn't really ready to take advantage of that storage in any meaningful way. So they're like, all right, what are we gonna do with this?
Well, they decided that they were going to create games with lots of video in them. You know, a kind of game that consists of a bunch of video and audio clips, and you press different buttons to play the different parts.
And games are by definition interactive, and video is by definition not. So the games are more choose your own adventure than game, where you're just picking one path and just watching what happens.
Spawned some of the worst games of all time, including Night Trap, Sewer Shark, and the Make My Video series starring such fine artists as Marky Mark and CNC Music Factory. So with such fantastic games as these, the Sega CD did not go anywhere.
So back in 1993, we had one of the most famous video game console flameouts of all time. This was going to be the next big thing. It was called the 3DO.
To be fair, the 3DO was a powerful piece of machinery. I mean, it rivaled, the PlayStation 1 before that was even out.
A guy named Trip Hawkins, he developed this new video game console technology, but he licensed it to other guys to actually make the hardware. He said, you guys make the hardware, and I'm gonna make the games, and you sell the hardware and make whatever money you can off that, and I'm just gonna make money on the games. The problem is, it's the razor and blade model. You're not supposed to sell the actual razor for a lot of money. You sell the blades, and that's what you make your money off of. So the guys who made the console, they couldn't make any money. They had to charge $700 for this thing. Literally $700. In 1993, that's a lot of scratch.
When I was a kid, I never understood. It cost 5 times as much as the other systems, but it's really not that much better than Super Nintendo. It certainly doesn't look 5 times better than Super Nintendo.
If you don't have hardware that people can afford, they're not gonna buy it. If people don't buy it, people aren't gonna make games for it, so you're not gonna make money anyway.
So you basically got a hunk of plastic that's completely useless. Nice $700 doorstop.
In 1993, Atari released the Jaguar. Some of the pitfalls of the Jaguar, their ridiculous 12-button grid-like controller.
Even the worst controller, the buttons go where your fingers go. But this is really just something very unnatural. It's really incredible that it exists at all.
If you want to look at some of the titles of the Jaguar games, just do a search online for worst games ever, and you'll see basically a list of all of these games.
At least we know today what the Jaguar controller looks like. Nobody left living knows what a 3DO controller looks like.
2 years after the Sega CD tanked, they came out with another brilliant add-on to the Genesis system, the Sega 32X.
There's not really an example in the history of games of an add-on to a system being successful, like games coming out that require just this whole new component to your system working.
So another brilliant business move, a couple of months after the 32X hits the market, Sega announces that the Saturn's coming out, and it's 10 times more powerful than this machine. Why the heck am I gonna go buy a 32X?
Yeah, you can't put something out and say, this is it for now, but pretty soon there's going to be something better. When you put something out, that's got to be your product for the next few years.
So when the Saturn launched, it didn't really do as well as Sega hoped at first, so then they jumped the gun again and immediately started talking about the Sega Dreamcast. And it totally pissed off designers because they were like, hey, if you're not going to support the Saturn, we're not going to do it either. And so they stopped making games for it.
Consoles have to be made to last. It's not just a one-time launch and then you're done with it like a movie. There's a lot of things that go into it, and they have to stay afloat for 5-6 years. When you buy a console, you want to buy one and then just worry about buying the games for it, not just buying new consoles.
You may say to yourself, what is the biggest bonehead move in the history of video game consoles? Well, you wouldn't have to think too long because it's nearly unanimous. It's Nintendo's Virtual Boy.
Realistically, Nintendo was questioning whether it was even going to launch the Virtual Boy or not. But when the N64 got delayed for the umpteenth time, they just had to put something on the market. And there went the Virtual Boy.
Now, this console was supposed to be a put-the-goggles-on 3D experience, just like you see in movies about the future where they have flying cars and picture phones and virtual worlds they can walk around in. You had this whole big stand you had to put it on and stick your head inside it like you're in traction in the hospital with a big neck brace on. Don't turn your head, you're in a car crash.
It was like 4 boom boxes, except mounted to your face. And then, of course, playing it for too long hurts your eyes, which is always good.
And of course, the biggest problem, they couldn't get it to run any real games, so they just decided to make them red. That's the only color in the games, red and black. You can get your games any color you want, just so long as it's red.
There were only 14 games made for the Virtual Boy, one less than the Jaguar CD, setting an all-time record for the least successful console of all time. I did like the controller, though. It had a nice, comfortable controller, actually.
So throughout all of video game history, the one thing worth noting is that basically the top console was never the most powerful.
Take a look at all the different generations of video game consoles. The original Atari 2600 was not as good as the Intellivision, and the ColecoVision outsold it by about a bazillion units. The Sega Master System, well, that was better than the original NES, but it didn't sell nearly as well. Atari's Jaguar and the 3DO, well, they kicked the Super Nintendo's ass. Again, all complete failures. The original PlayStation, not really as good as the N64. PlayStation 2, not really as good as the Xbox. Still the #1 console that generation. Why is that? Because it's all about the games, not about the hardware.
Companies do not learn. Look at the PlayStation 3, for example. This is a case in which they're selling an extremely powerful bit of hardware, but right now, there really aren't games to justify this purchase.
These companies come out with a new console and still think they're gonna change the industry, change the way people purchase. No. Consumers want to have fun. They don't care about the hardware.
It's always software over hardware.
It's always been about the games.
It's funny that right now, anyway, the Wii, being one of the best-selling systems, happens to be the one with the least horsepower. That's something we've seen historically, and I just don't know what it is about these video game executives. It just doesn't get that.
Rated E10 plus to T. Play the games everyone wants to play.
For hundreds of great shows like this one, go to ONNetworks.com.